Hey expats and travelers, I'm Kaylee with Expats Everywhere. In today's video, we get the critical information you need for understanding the NHR scheme here in Portugal. And since we're talking about taxes today, did you know that as an American living abroad, the IRS still requires you to file taxes? Taxes for Expats is a tax preparation company who has over 25 years of experience helping Americans living abroad file their US taxes. Get in touch with them through our link in the description below.
Augusto, if you could tell us, what is NHR, and can you explain a bit how the scheme works?
Okay, so the NHR is a tax regime. It's a special tax regime that is available in Portugal for personal income tax purposes only. And please do not mix the tax regime with any immigration issues or immigration situations. So visa or residency permits are separate matters and are not related with the tax regime. So the tax regime of the NHR is applicable to Portuguese tax residents and has some benefits when compared to a regular taxpayer in Portugal. So the main advantages are related with some exemptions that are applicable on passive income or investment income from foreign source. For example, interest, dividends, and rental income obtained abroad could be exempt in Portugal in case of the NHR taxpayers, but also be aware that capital gains, for instance, may not be exempt from taxation in Portugal. For example, the sale of shares or bonds with capital gains. Even if you are NHR, you will still be subject to or could be subject to taxation in Portugal. And apart from the benefits for investment income, there are also exemptions that are applicable in case of employment income and self-employment income from foreign source, but those exemptions are subject to some conditions and are not applicable in all circumstances. Other benefits that are applicable is that employment income and self-employment income from Portuguese source, if derived from what we call the high value-added activities, are subject to a flat rate of 20%, which compares to progressive rates up to 48% in case of regular tax residents. And finally, also a benefit for pension income that is currently subject to a 10% personal income tax rate under the NHR, and for taxpayers that were registered as tax residents in Portugal before March 2020. In such case, the pension income is fully exempt. So these are the main tax advantages of this regime. And the regime is applicable for 10 years, since the first year that you moved to Portugal and became tax resident here.
And then what happens after 10 years?
Well, after 10 years, and for now there is no rule that allows the renewal of the regime, meaning that after that period you became a regular tax resident in Portugal and will be subject to taxation as a general taxpayer here.
So how do you apply for the NHR scheme, and who technically qualifies for this?
Okay, who qualifies? Who became tax resident in Portugal under the rules that are stated in the tax law and has not been tax resident here for the previous 5 years.
Okay.
So basically the condition is became tax resident and haven't been tax resident in the last 5 years. We need to see if we accomplish the criteria of the tax residency. It's the main question. How do you apply? As almost all tax obligations in Portugal, the application for the NHR regime is filed at the personal area of the taxpayer in the Portuguese tax authorities portal.
When do I have to apply for the NHR system, and what happens if I miss the cutoff date?
Okay, let's hope you don't miss. You have to apply for the NHR regime until the end of March of the year following the one that you became tax resident in Portugal. So, for instance, if you became tax resident in 2021, you will need to apply for the regime until the end of March 2022. And what happens if you miss this deadline? Well, you missed the opportunity to apply for the regime. So if you miss the deadline, you are a regular tax resident in Portugal, and you will not have any way back to claim the NHR regime.
I see. So when we become tax residents, is that when we get our NIF or when we have our SEF appointment to confirm our residency in the country?
Yeah, well, it's the second option.
Okay.
So you can obtain the NIF, the tax identification number, as a non-resident in an initial stage. It doesn't mean that you became tax resident in that moment. It's the moment you register with your address in Portugal with the tax authorities.
What is required to file? How do I file? Like, what type of documentation do I need to submit?
In terms of the application for the NHR, if you were not previously tax resident in Portugal, you will not need to add that much information in the application. So it's more or less automatic, and you don't need to add documentation to support the application. After becoming tax resident, you have other tax compliance obligations, namely file the annual personal income tax return every year and report your worldwide income in that return.
Okay, I see. So what is the taxation agreement between Portugal and the US for retirement income? I think there's like a lot of unclear information online about what that actually is. So what is this agreement?
Okay. As most of the double tax treaties concluded by Portugal and other countries, the double tax treaty concluded with the US foresees that pension and retirement income is taxed exclusively at the country of residency of the taxpayer. However, in case of US, there are several exceptions, namely in respect to social security benefits and public pensions, and the double tax treaty states that those kind of pensions can be taxed in the US as well. So it means that it could be taxed in the source at US and then in Portugal as the tax residency of the taxpayer.
Okay, so this was actually going to be my next question. Because Social Security in the United States isn't looked at as pension, is that why it's taxed both in the US and then also in Portugal?
Well, in Portugal, in general terms, the benefits from the Social Security are regarded as a pension income.
Right, okay. Okay, I understand.
But of course, this leads us to discussion of the benefits of the NHR regime, under which we have a favorable tax regime for pension income,
Which is 10%.
which currently is 10% for new tax residents, but is exemption for those that apply for the regime until 2020.
Okay, I see. Okay. So anyone that has already applied for NHR, it's tax free.
Yeah, as long as that person was registered as tax resident in Portugal until March 2020.
Okay, so anyone new that's watching this looking to move to Portugal now, sorry, you're paying 10%, right?
Yes, unfortunately, yes.
Okay. Well, that is unfortunate. So does Portugal tax both federal and state pensions? And if so, what is the rate?
Yes, those are taxed, both of them, and the tax rate is 10%, special flat rate of 10% in case of the NHR taxpayers.
Okay, so 10% for 10 years, and then after that, you're going to be a normal taxpayer.
Correct.
Okay. So my next question, there's a lot of confusion about this online, which is what types of visas are eligible for NHR?
Okay, as I mentioned earlier in this interview, the NHR is a tax regime and is applicable to all tax residents. And this is irrespectively of the type of visa or type of residency permit. To give an example, this is a tax regime that is also applicable to Portuguese nationals that moved to Portugal after some years abroad, and also it's a regime that is applicable to European Union citizens, which do not need a visa or a specific immigration procedure to live in Portugal. So there are two separate issues.
Yep.
The tax regime and the visa immigration procedure. And the NHR is applicable as long as you are tax resident, regardless the type of visa or residency permits.
Okay, so my next set of questions actually was going to be what do taxes look like for the different visas, but what it sounds like is there's no difference. If you're on a D2, a D7 golden visa, it just looks at what your tax situation is. It doesn't look at what your visa is, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, that's it. That's it. Most important is make sure that you are tax resident in Portugal. That would be the condition to apply for the NHR. From that moment on, irrespectively of the visa, the tax regime is applicable.
Okay. We have a very specific question from one of our patrons on Patreon, and they ask if they're fully retired and they're drawing both Social Security and a pension from the US, what will the Portuguese tax implications be?
Well, under the NHR, if they move to Portugal after March 2020, the 10% flat rate will apply on pension income and Social Security benefits.
Okay, and then another question that came from our patrons on Patreon is disability income taxed in Portugal?
Yes, as a general rule, yes.
And that's also at 10%?
Yes.
Okay. Does Portugal tax the gross amount or do they tax what is left after the US taxes?
On the gross amount, actually.
Okay. After listening to all of this, and I realized that I'm not eligible for the NHR scheme, because there might be some people out there that realize that they're not eligible for it. Maybe they applied after the fact. They're already living in Portugal and they didn't submit their application in time. What does that person do?
In such case, there is not much to do, and the person will be subject to personal income tax in Portugal as a regular tax resident. So, in brief terms, income is the overall income is subject to progressive rates up to 48%, or at a flat rate of 28% in certain passive or investment income sources.
For those that really like to plan ahead, what is someone's tax situation going to look like in 10 years after being in Portugal? What types of percentages are they looking at having to pay once they become a long-term tax resident here in Portugal?
Cool. Okay. That's the ones that I mentioned before. So progressive tax rates up to 48% in, for example, to employment income, self-employment income, and a 28% flat rate in case of investment income.
The 48% is for high income earners?
Yes, the 48% is for income above 80,000 euros per year.
What does the tax rate look like for someone who is either self-employed or making money from a foreign source? What are they taxed like under the NHR scheme? What's their percent? Is it 20%? Did I understand that correctly?
Yes. If such income is not exempt, it would be taxed at a flat rate of 20%. if in case of self-employment income, the activity is considered as high value-added one, which in Portugal there is a list of activities that are deemed as high value-added.
And where could we find that list?
Well, it's available in the Portuguese Tax Authority's portal, and of course in the pages that are available in the internet.
Okay, so we'll try to find the links for those and put those in the description section. Augusto, if you could tell us a bit about your company and what services that you can provide our audience.
We are a firm that is engaged mainly on audit, financial and tax advisory services in Portugal, and we have several private clients, and we have a large experience with private clients, namely with expats that decide to move to this beautiful country of Portugal to work for retirement or just enjoying the good weather and lifestyle. So we have experience in advising the private clients in all steps that are required to comply with all tax requirements in Portugal and in an efficient way if possible.
And do you work with both individuals and businesses? So you could help someone that's an entrepreneur and they want to start up a business here. You could also help them with their tax situation?
Yes, definitely.
So if someone wants to use your services or they're having any questions about what you all do, how can they get a hold of you?
Through our page in the internet, which is dfk.pt, and of course in my email, which is augusto.paulin@dfk.com.pt.
Okay, so we'll put all of those links in the description section for you guys to check out. If you guys are interested in learning more about your American taxes back in the US, you can click this video right here, and that will tell you about your tax implications back in the US. Thanks, Augusto. Appreciate it. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.